special bottles which will close automatically at any selected depth have been used about 4,000 times. Bottle samples need analysis, but this electronic probe can give some instant answers. Yes, it'll tell you the sea is salty, but that saltiness changes with distance from the shore, the amount of fresh water from rivers, and with the depth of the water. And it affects life in the bay, as do the varying amounts of oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and other dissolved chemicals. Take a bouquet of red plastic mushrooms, tie them with a ribbon or a collar made of salt, attach a card which will tell whoever recovers it that there's a reward for its return, and commit the plastic posy to the deep. Another consignment of what are called woodhead drifters are bound for the bottom. The salt collar dissolves, allowing each mushroom to stalk the seabed separately, hopefully to be found by a bounty-claiming beachcomber. In this work, old charts have been used as well as more recent soundings. When a woodhead drifter arrives on a beach, its path from release to arrival indicates how the sand and mud are moving with the tides and currents. The sandbanks and mudflats are constantly changing. Sand and mud are frequently in motion, sometimes along unlikely routes, for the movement of sediment isn't always the same as the movement of the water. So the sediments are mapped, the movements plotted, and compared with the computer model. For as the framework of the bay changes, so does the animal and plant life within it. But what kinds of plant and what types of animal are there here? How are they interrelated? The research ships go fishing for the answers. The trawl nets have been out a good many times over the 2 years, but there's something about fishing that makes each new haul an exciting event, even for the old hands at the game. At first sight, I was afraid that all they'd caught was seaweed, but no. The spiky globefish puffs up like a water-filled balloon in self-defense.
Yeah, that's incredible colour.
A red mullet's blue, red, purple and yellow scales flash in the sun, bright from the sea but quick to fade. Hooked sticks are safer for raking with than bare hands.
Where's the spine? There's always a spine on these things. There's always something that's going to get you.
The dangerous spines are on the gill covers of this rock flathead. It's an edible fish, as is the gummy shark, whose flesh is sold as flake. Although apparently sleepy and stunned by its capture, a shark can still bite.
Watch your fingers.
The shark missed, but this southern cardinal has a mouthful.
It's a gravid male holding the fertilized eggs in his mouth. Presumably those don't feed at all once they become, take the eggs into the mouth.
An animal that specially intrigues me, or as they say here, has a lot of soul, is this lobster-like contraption. It's known as a Balmain bug, or for reasons which become apparent when it's allowed to do its own thing, the flapjack. There's enough variety of fish here to support both local commercial and sport fisheries. Fish are close to the top of the chain of what eats what. The numbers of fish may depend on the quality of the water and on their food supply, much of which is found on the bed of the bay. Dredgings have been made at over 20 selected places in the bay at various times of the year. Most bottom-dwelling creatures don't move very far during their lifetime, and so a periodic check shows up any seasonal or other change that may be happening.
Well, it looks like a pretty good haul. Yes. No, one sailor's got all their messages with an urchin in the bottom. There's an octopus there.
There are hazards in these hauls too. A blue-ringed octopus bites like every octopus, and it injects a poison that's extremely virulent. The first known living specimens of this rather dull-looking shellfish were found near Westernport in 1826. It's called Neotrigonia, and it's far from dull, having a colourful and lustrous shell, a lively turn of foot, and a fossil pedigree that goes back 300 million years.
What's his name?
Oh, that's Hyura stolonifera. Well, they're commonly call them sea tulips.
And this is animal?
Yes, this is an animal.
The sea tulip is but one of the animals here that might at first glance be mistaken for a plant. This is called a sea pen, and each apparently single animal is in fact a colony. Sea pens can be as much as half a metre long, but then this supporting rod of horny material, which keeps the colony upright when rooted in sand, would be as thick as a pencil. Sponges are animal too, and they grow on nearly everything.
Oh yes,
It's like a tongue there.
oh, there's something like 200 species of sponge in the bay. And most of them have animals living in the openings or in the tissues.
Inside.
Find worms, small crustaceans.
Pretty small ones.
They're usually
Oh, that's a big one, isn't it? Yes. Oh wow, yes, look at that. Worms inside.
this is a rather large one, and if it ever got a hold of you, it would take a good chunk out of your hand.
Counting the numbers of animals means using this grab to take a bite at the bed of known size, often bringing up 1,500 animals or so, some very small indeed, and many of them new to science and unnamed. Over 2,000 different species make up this rich and varied community. Every inch of the seabed seems to have something that's filtering a living from the nutrient-rich water. Sponges in profusion, fleshy sea squirts and crusty sea mats cover the rocks, and looking quite different in their natural setting, a field of sea pens waft in an underwater breeze. Peculiar pulsations ripple through the colony, possibly part of the business of burrowing in the sand. Each fleshy lobe bears a row of tiny white polyps, here contracted, and here expanded into a fringe of stinging tentacles that can clutch at passing particles of food. Between its clumsy clamberings, a brittle star rakes food from sand and mud, while worms as colourful as the finest opals paddle around in search of more active prey. There's a hint of Spain about the sponge hat worn by this crab, but look closely at its trimmings. Countless millions of tiny crustaceans called amphipods cover the bed of the bay and are no doubt a shrimp cocktail for many a browsing fish. Bright colours are usually a warning to other animals that the owner is likely to smell nasty or to sting. Whether this sea slug does either perhaps awaits discovery. Having no shell, its gills are exposed as a crown that can be retracted into the soft tissue of the animal. It browses on sea mats and sponges. An acorn worm picks up particles of food on mucus on the surface of its body, while that odd relative of the starfishes and urchins, the sea cucumber, shovels a meal into its mouth. Anglerfish should sit quietly camouflaged, luring a meal near its mouth, but this one, like that Balmain bug, has a lot of soul and pussyfoots around the rocks, disturbing the crabs. Another fish of the seabed is the stargazer. That stare is more likely to register food than planets, and that mouth misses nothing that those blue eyes fancy. There are other blue eyes here as well. These belong to a scallop, whose two shell valves often end up as ashtrays, but this one is covered with sponge. Shells get covered in all sorts of incrustations, and when the original owner has died, a hermit crab can move in. That's not unusual, but I found one hermit who was living in a tube that he'd fitted like a stopper in a bottle. Whose tube it was, no one could tell me, but this hermit does also live in holes in rock, and it wasn't travelling alone. A lamp shell was getting free transport with it. Lamp shells, or brachiopods as they're called, were living 570 million years ago. 30,000 species have become extinct, but a few are still hanging on, and Westernport has a good many of this type, twisting on their stalks and sieving a living from the bay, at least while the system is still clean and in balance. The spikiness of sea urchins keeps large animals away, but it's probable that to remove the tiny larvae that rain down on them, between the spines they have their own sets of tweezers and mechanical grabs to pick off anything that tries to gain a foothold. Constant work in the blizzard of microscopic creatures that are the plankton of the bay. Dozens of these whirling balls could settle on the head of a pin, and each would grow into that most sedentary of animals, a sponge. A rather more active future awaits this double-jointed job, when it's down to earth as a mantis shrimp. And even when it's young, there's a certain worminess about a worm, whether it's the round sort or the flat. No one knows just what this is or what it grows